Okay, good afternoon. This December 4th, 2023, we continue with our winter breeding certificate. And now we have this topic about minimizing hay costs on your farm with a presentation of Dr. Steve Hart from Langston University. And we invite as a moderator, Ms. Jennifer Lutes, economist from University of Missouri, and we are so happy to give the good afternoon to you and just to be waiting for this presentation and also for your experience. I mean, all the attendees experience and you want to share in the chat, so you are very welcome, and also some of the questions. So go ahead, Dr. Steve, and just start, please.
Okay, thank you, Homero. Really appreciate the invitation to share about minimizing hay cost on your farm. Hay is one of the bigger expenses for this time of year. And well, assuming I can go to the next slide. My down arrow's not working.
You might be able to hit the space bar.
Oh.
And you may just have to click on your slides again.
Okay. That's working. Okay, we'll talk about what is hay. Most of y'all know hay, but hay is dried forage. It can be a legume or grass that's generally wrapped into a round bale, compressed into a small or big square bale, held together with twine, net, or wire so that it holds its shape and we can move it. Hay is used to provide forage for times when forage is not growing or available, typically during a drought or when animals do not have access to a pasture. Hay is almost 3 times more expensive a method of providing forage to animals as compared to grazing due to the cost to make hay and hay losses during making the hay, storing, and feeding the hay. 5 to 30% of the hay can be lost just during storage alone. Even with small square bales stored inside, there are some losses. How do you get the thick carpet of hay that you walk on when you're handling bales? However, these losses are small, but they do add up. Large square bales can be stored inside with minimal losses. Round bales can be stored inside with minimal losses. However, for most people, they store round bales outside, usually due to lacking a building. And hay losses can be greatly affected by whether it's net wrapped or twine wrapped. Net wrap, of course, giving you less losses of hay. Grass hay is more resistant to deterioration as compared to legume hay because grass hay sheds the water or the rain better. Weather losses are greatly affected by the amount of rain, and covering the hay can significantly reduce losses. So it basically depends upon how much rain that you do have. If you're in a 50-inch rainfall area, weather losses can be serious and you really need to try to store the hay inside. Whereas if you're in a 25-inch or 35-inch rainfall area, you can certainly fare better with storing bales outside. Hay needs to be stored in a well-drained area. If you've got a low area, those bales will soak up water, they will mold and rot on the bottom. It's good if you can elevate the hay to keep it from standing in water. Some people put up a ridge of soil that they stack the hay on. Some people will put some sort of sticks down or even rock down to keep the hay from standing in water. But basically, do the best job that you can. Think and plan. How you feed hay can greatly affect hay losses. Small square bales are often fed in a hay rack with a trough to catch the hay that drops. Hay can be fed in a feeder that animals can reach into and has a keyhole slot to keep them from dragging hay out. This shows an example of a feeder that has a trough below it to catch the hay. Here's a keyhole feeder, often used with dairy goats, but it can be used for other goats provided their horns don't prevent them from getting their heads into the feeder. It helps to reduce hay losses, but animals can still drag hay out. It's almost impossible to prevent goats from wasting hay, but it does help to keep their heads in the feeder and reduce hay wastage. Here's another example of a hay feeder, a home-built one that has 4x4 cattle panel here holding the hay, and the goats reach in, goats and or sheep reach in and grab a bite of hay then. And it has a trough below it to catch the dropped hay. Feeding round bales, it's much more difficult to reduce hay wastage. The worst way is to set the round bale on end and let animals at it. You can waste about 1/4 to 1/2 of the hay. Animals like to climb on it and foul it. As animals eat on it, they get the lower part of it. It'll look like a toadstool, perfectly balanced, until your finest, most expensive goat gets under it, and then it'll fall on them and smother them. So sheep and goats are both subject to being killed this way. Hay can be fed on the ground on the end if 2 cattle panels are sandwiched around it, assuming the horns do not prevent animals from accessing the hay, or you can cut holes into the panels. It works well for sheep. Round bales can be fed in various kinds of round bale feeders. Some work better than others. If there's a sufficient number of animals, round bales can be rolled out. Works very well for large herds of animals. But if you have 50 head of animals, you can't really roll a round bale out. Different story if you have 500 or 600 animals. Works well. Animals eat the hay off the ground and basically will clean it up if you kind of force them to. Here's a homemade round bale feeder. It has a trough below it that kind of catches the hay so animals can eat the hay off of it. Has spacing there that the animals can eat the hay out of, and they will pull hay out just the way goats and sheep are. Here's a commercial hay feeder for feeding round bales. Kind of has some slots for goats or sheep to put their heads in. This one has a trough around it to catch the hay, so it'd be very good for feeding round bales. However, a caveat in feeding round bales, there's almost no way. Well, this one has bars that hold the bale of hay, and it's very pricey because of that. But there's almost no way that you can prevent a few animals from getting their head in the wrong place and getting choked by the bale dropping on them. Here's another example of a round bale feeder. Not terribly efficient. The animals can reach their noses in and get hay out, but they pull it out and drop it on the ground. There's no trough in front of it to catch the hay. One may be able to go down there regularly with a pitchfork and fork the hay back on top of the feeder to prevent wastage. Here's an example of someone using a front end loader to roll hay bales out with sheep. It can work very well. There are trailers that hold round bales and will load them out. There are 3-point hitch attachments for that. And so it can work very well if you have a large herd. However, most sheep and goat people have herds too small to take advantage of this. This is a commercially available hay feeder for round bales. Works with sheep and goats very well. It kind of looks like a stock panel that is cut into 4-foot sections. that are fastened together, which they can be fastened together with wire, and they have holes cut out so the animals can reach in and get the hay. And so this is a fairly efficient feeder. You still have to kind of monitor wastage, but it's a cheap feeder. You know, probably you can probably build it yourself for under $100, as compared to buying some of the other commercial feeders that you're talking about $800 or more. This is a commercial hay feeder. It's used for sheep and goats, reputed to be very efficient at reducing hay wastage. The bars are 4 inches apart there, and the sides collapse into the round bale. And so it works well. It's not impossible for a goat to get their horns hooked in it, or you have to go out and release them, but it doesn't kill them like some of the other round bale feeders can. And still, even with this one, even though it's very efficient at reducing wastage, as one producer said, you have to go out there every morning with a pitchfork and fork it back in. Here's another round bale feeder. Has bars that kind of cradle the hay. There are many different types of this. Many of them, the bars are closer than this feeder. But the big hazard here is animals can still get hung, and this type waste a lot of hay with the bars being so far apart. So we've covered about reducing hay losses by the way that we store it and the way that we feed it. We can reduce hay cost in a number of different ways. We can buy hay during the summer when it's being produced. It's cheaper then. When someone has to put it in their barn and then load it in for us, they've got to be paid for that, and that adds up. And hay prices are always much greater in winter than in the summer. Hay is cheapest when picked up directly from the field where it's baled. The hay producer has much less invested in it. You need to locate several hay producers and price shop some. And many goat people, I guess, don't know enough hay producers. You have cattle producer friends that can help you to locate people that produce hay. It's beneficial to develop a relationship with a hay producer. He may be able to plan on producing hay like you need and at a fair price. Yes.
I think we can go for some of the questions now. You give me I will be making the poll. Okay, and so right now the question is how expensive is hay methods of providing forage to animals as compared to grazing? So the people start answering. Once that they finish, you can select one of these 4 answers. And so...
Listening to me, yes, it's roughly 3 times more expensive than grazing.
Just give the opportunity to the people to answer. Now we have almost everybody. We have 21, 24, 25, 26, 27 people answer. Okay. So this is, yeah. So do you want to comment, Jennifer or Dr. Steve, about the answer?
Well, yes, hay is just much more expensive because you've got the losses in the field when you're making hay. Every step of making hay, there are losses. Then and hay machinery is expensive. Diesel fuel is expensive. And so it's expensive to get that hay wrapped up.
Okay.
It's expensive to get it hauled. And so it all adds up.
Okay. Now I go with question two. Some people say, "Hey, I couldn't because it's like against time." So you had to, I'm sorry for that, but
It's a race. Let's see who can click the button first.
Okay, now we have how much forage of hay can be lost during storage? Nothing of loss, between 5 to 30%, or I'm not sure. So, okay, oh my gosh, almost everybody answered now.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so there is a loss. I learned even when that is not the case, when you have alfalfa, you have a lot of loss of leaves, of alfalfa leaves. That is a very good quality forage. So, so do you want to share a little bit about this losing of forage, Dr. Hart or Jennifer?
Yes. If you have a round bale and you lose the outer 4 inches of it, that generally is about between 10 and 15% of the weight of the bale and the outer 4 inches. So that gives you an idea that we need to do the best that we can to preserve that hay.
Okay.
So
Jennifer?
there's a question in the chat. This talks about, says the farmers that I've talked to don't get their hay forage tested. Trust me, it's good. It's something that they keep hearing over and over again. And how can they buy big bales without that nutrition analysis? And that's one of the things I talk about a lot, is knowing what hay we're feeding. And it's been really nice to buy it on a nutrient analysis. But one thing you can do, if the nutrient analysis takes about a week to get back. And so if this farmer is not moving hay quickly, then maybe you could test the hay before you buy it to make a determination if you want to buy it. And to make it beneficial for the farmer too, you might offer the results to them afterwards, whether you buy it or not. And when you say it's not hard to learn to do your own, what are you referring to? To making hay or testing hay or Carrie? But as far as loss, while Carrie's finishing her question there,
Okay.
We lose hay in every stage. And sometimes that's acceptable and sometimes it's not. And some of it we just have to deal with. But one of the things that I find valuable about lost hay is when they use a little bit as bedding and I don't have to provide bedding. I think of that as an acceptable loss. Steve, do you?
Yes, Jennifer, probably the biggest problem that I see with losing, or biggest thing that causes hay losses, people that store round bales in areas that collects water.
Yeah. Yep.
And it wicks right up into the bale and you'll lose a lot of hay with that. You
That's
need
right.
to store hay someplace on well-drained ground.
Okay, I go for the third question, and after that, Dr. Steve can continue with his presentation. So this is strategy to reduce hay costs. The answers are a little bit tricky, so read careful. Probably you should be looking for the best answer. Probably some of them could be good, but could be more expensive. Okay. Do you want to comment, Dr. Steve, Jennifer?
Yes, development. J.C. Penney talked about business relationships being so important. And I think it's the same way with farming too, to develop a relationship with a hay producer. The hay producer is less likely to take advantage of you if he knows you. And he may be willing to try to make hay just like you need.
Okay, and also, what is the best time to buy the hay? What season of the year?
Summer when it's being made, buying it out of the field.
Yeah.
That is the cheapest because the hay producer hasn't spent money to haul it to the barn.
Okay. And
I'm
is-
gonna take a moment to shamelessly plug something, and I'll get you guys the link in the chat here in a minute. There is a new feed stuff finder that has gone live last week, and it's to help people look for hay, especially during drought seasons like we've had in our 4-state area, and well, pretty much all of the western part of the Midwest, or the eastern part of the West, I guess. But one of the things that we talk about a lot is, you know, we may be able to get hay cheaper from another state. However, we always have to factor in the delivery cost of that hay and the trucking cost and getting it to us. And that's one thing that this tool is allowing us to do. And so if you're looking for hay or looking to sell hay, this may be a way that you can spread the word a little bit about what you have or what you're needing.
Good. Okay, thank you. Well, Dr. Steve, you want to continue with your presentation,
Okay.
please?
Okay. Basically, you need to start out knowing what quality of hay that you do need. Because there's all sorts of quality of hay, from some basically junk that's baled up all the way to some of the best alfalfa. And hay is often priced by quality. There are other factors such as salesmanship that factor into that. You can buy grass, and your strategy for wintering animals, you can buy grass hay and supplement with protein. You may not need to supplement with protein if we're over 7%, and you have dry sheep or goats. Then you can get by with maybe some whole shell corn supplementation, or maybe none at all. And as Jennifer said, we talked about getting a hay analysis. A good hay producer has an idea about what the hay protein will run from experience. You know, they know the hay was at the grass was at a certain stage when it was cut, and look at how leafy it is, and they can give you an estimate. But you need to get a hay analysis. You know, if you're looking for a 8% protein hay, the producer can probably get close to that for you. But you need to get a hay analysis. County extension educator can help you there. You can buy weedy hay, weedy grass hay. The hay being the grass part of the hay being good quality. And basically, goats don't mind the weeds, sheep may not either. And so the hay producer may have a place in his field that's weedy, and so he knows he could make hay here for you then and give you a good price on it. Okay, do you want to feed alfalfa so you don't need to feed a protein supplement? Will a grassy alfalfa do? It's likely to be cheaper. Like we said, a good quality grass hay greater than 7% protein. And the reason why we say that is basically when the diet gets to be less than 7% protein, it impairs digestibility and intake of the hay. You can feed lower protein hay. That's much prairie hay runs 5 or 6% protein, but you need a protein supplement to go along with it. Another thing, some hay producers are not paragons of integrity. Almost every profession has those that are bad apples. And so there's a few hay producers that are like that, and they will see a naive small ruminant producer that doesn't know hay and take advantage of them. Look at the hay when you feed it. Quality hay is leafy, no seed heads, no big stems, no mold. That's the white powdery dust in the hay bale, and it smells like hay. Mold is caused by baling hay before it is dry or getting wet while it's in the bale. Dry animals have the lowest nutrient requirements. Lambing or kidding greatly increases the nutrient requirement of animals. So if you lamb or kid while you're feeding hay, you have to feed more hay, higher quality hay, and more supplement. And so if you need to lamb or kid in January, February time of the year, do the benefits pay for the cost of extra nutrition? You know, lambing or kidding early can be beneficial from the standpoint if you sell show prospects. However, if you're doing it because people in Texas lamb or kid in January, February, in Missouri, you don't have the same weather they do in Texas. Look at when do cattlemen calve. Some of them even calve too early. When do deer have their fawns? If you're producing commercial meat goats or commercial lambs, there's no real need to lamb or kid early. Whereas if you're selling registered animals or show stock, yes, people want big animals. Reduce your hay waste, and we talked about the feeders, and use stockpiled forage. And so we're going to talk about stockpiled forage.
I'm going to pause you there for a minute, Dr. Hart.
Okay, Jennifer.
There's a couple questions here. So in the absence of hay analysis, what are the top questions that should be asked a hay provider to determine quality?
Well, basically, you have to open a bale and look at it to see how leafy it is. Or maybe the producer could tell you what stage it was in when it was cut. If it had a head on it, if it was in the boot stage, or it was earlier than that. Because stage of maturity is the major factor. And probably the second biggest factor is the weather when the hay was made. For instance, if it rained on it, that reduces the quality very definitely.
Okay, thank you. And there, I've got another question. It talks about fescue toxicity, words, being an issue in pregnant mares, and was curious if there are any other issues to health that grasses or legumes could cause in our sheep and goats.
You say issues that legumes could, or that?
Yeah, probably. Are there any other issues from grasses or hay, any types of hay that we need to worry about in our sheep and goats?
Right off, you can have nitrate toxicity with grasses and prussic acid poisoning. Generally, the hay producer should know whether it's likely to have nitrates. Basically, nitrates are high whenever something's been fertilized and then it turns dry. They accumulate nitrates then. And basically, your state forage lab can test for nitrates. And your county extension educator can interpret the level of nitrates in it. Prussic acid's another one. And it's basically in your sorghums and in your Sudan grass causes problems. And so that can be tested for also, but it isn't usually in conjunction with drought. And those are the main things. Alfalfa hay, you can have the blister beetle in it, which definitely affects horses. Much less effect on cows, but still can have an effect on cows. And right off, Jennifer, I think that's all that I remember.
I think you're pretty good there. Another quick question. How do you ensure that weedy hay doesn't have toxic plants included? Or is that not much of an issue in dried materials? So how do we ensure that we don't have toxic plants in our hay that we're purchasing, essentially?
Number one would be talk to the producer that produced it. And you know, if you're develop a relationship with the producer, it would be nice if you can go out in the field and look at the stage of the plants before he cuts hay, and look at the plants that are out there, assuming that you can identify the toxic plants. But I guess toxic plants are, goats will often sort toxic plants out. Most animals that are familiar with an area will be able to avoid the toxic plants, but somewhere back in my memory, there's one or two plants that the animals will avoid when they're green, but they'll eat when they're dried and have toxicity. So you should know what the toxic plants are in your area.
Thank you, thank you. And then I have two more questions and I'm going to let you get started again. So what impact do you think the 21 bale bundles have had on the hay industry, since most producers are spraying bales to prevent mold?
Okay, I'm not familiar with the 21 bale pack, Jennifer.
I'm not really sure that I am either. So we might skip that one until Cinda can give us a little more information. And then is there a difference or an effect on hay between using chicken litter as fertilizer or commercial fertilizer? Would the chicken litter raise phosphorus levels in the hay?
There's a good chance that they could raise phosphorus levels in the hay. Yes, which generally we're short on phosphorus in hay. And so that could be a good thing.
And I'll just plug, one way to know for sure is to have a nutrient analysis performed on your hay.
Yes, you would have to ask for a mineral analysis, Jennifer.
Yes.
You know, your standard hay analysis is basically protein and energy. And you'd have to ask for a minerals analysis, which would cost you a little more.
A little bit. I know the lab we use is not, I think it's like an extra $1 or $2. It's really not a whole lot more.
That's a bargain.
It is, yes. They're pretty good to us. All right, Steve, I'll stop interrupting you for now.
Okay, Jennifer. Okay, stockpiled forage is forage that's available to be consumed during the winter. It's out there standing. It may be intentionally stockpiled or unintentionally. It just happens to be there. It could be actively growing if the temperature is warm enough. Fescue and other cool season grasses will usually grow late into the fall to sometime in December, and sometime in mid-March they will start actively growing again. But it is often dormant forage, though. Usually in pastures that are rotation graze or deferred, you see the standing forage that their animals can graze. Lightly stocked pastures can accumulate stockpiled forage. Stockpiled forage, we can also kind of expand it out. Animals will often eat the leaves that fall from trees. Sheep and goats love acorns. Dry grass is what we typically think of. Green grass, if grass is growing, and tree bark. These all can provide some sort of source of forage for the animals. Fescue retains its quality longer than other forage species, so it's one of the best to stockpile. Cool season grasses such as your brome and orchard grass don't retain their quality as well as fescue does. but they nonetheless can be useful. Warm season native grasses such as big blue stem Indian grass maintain their quality pretty well during the winter. Red cedar can provide stockpiled forage if animals will consume it. Goats can consume red cedar in variable amounts. Some areas they can't get enough red cedar, and other areas they will barely touch it. There is something to do with soil climate that the red cedar grows in. Bermuda grass tends to deteriorate fairly readily, as do most legumes. Many legumes at frost will just plain old drop their leaves on the ground. Rainfall causes stockpiled forage to deteriorate, causes loss of the dry matter, protein, and minerals. This just shows the cedar here that the animals have chosen to eat, just showing you that it can be a significant source of forage. Traditionally, fescue is the forage of choice for stockpiling. It's generally mowed or grazed sometime in August, fertilized, and then deferred from grazing to accumulate green forage. It maintains its quality fairly well throughout the winter. It's a valuable resource. It needs to be rationed out through the winter, though. You just turn your animals out there, and animals graze with one mouth and 4 feet that trample the ground, trample the forage. Strip graze it to efficiently use it, or you might limit graze it, such as limit to 3 hours on alternate days. We've done some work on wheat pasture with grazing 3 hours on alternate days, provided an adequate amount of protein for the animals, and the animals actually did better than they did on a protein supplement.
Dr. Steve, can I go for another poll?
Sure.
Okay. This is the 4. A good protein quality grass high and not so expensive is around this protein content. We have 13, 14, 16, 17, 20 people, 21, 22, 24, 25, almost everybody. 80% of the people have answered, 82%. 85. Okay, one more chance. Okay, 90%. Do you want to comment?
Yes, if you have hay that's got 7% protein or better, it may be possible to get by without protein supplementation. If you're in the vicinity of 4 to 6% protein in the hay, you're going to definitely need protein supplementation. It will help to increase intake as well as provide for the animals' protein requirements.
Okay, I will go for the next question, and that will be the last poll. Intelligence to occupy or forage. So what do you think is the best answer for that one? %60 of the people have an answer.
Yes, and in Missouri, stockpiling is not uncommon at all. A number of cattlemen will stockpile fescue then in Missouri. And it can work with sheep or goats very well also.
Okay, do you want to comment the strip graze? How many hours per day, or can you graze 24 hours a day?
Okay, basically, when you have a stockpiled forage, it's a valuable resource. And so you want to use it as efficiently as possible. And so that's why it's best to limit graze it, uh, either by strip grazing or by limiting animals to something like 3 hours every other day. Uh, and it's easy to train animals, once they learn that every other day they're out there, and after so many hours, when you go out there, they know it's time to head back in. So it's not really that difficult to graze animals every other day on stockpiled forage.
Dr. Hart, what do you think about Johnson grass? Some people have asked before how bad is the Johnson grass? How dangerous is to be grazing the Johnson grass?
Well, Johnson grass can be very good quality forage. Uh, it depends on the stage at which it is grazed or harvested. Uh, you need to get it before it gets into, actually, it's best to get it before it puts up the flag leaf, which is the last leaf it puts up before it puts up the stem. And so it can be very high in quality energy and medium in protein. So it can be very useful plant.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Jennifer, do you want to comment anything, or Dr. Steve to continue?
Yeah, so one of the nice things about stockpiled forage is that you don't, from an economics perspective, is that while you do have to pull your animals off and you have to put aside some land, you don't have to own a mower, conditioner, or cutter, or a rake, or a baler, or any of those things. One thing that we do find super helpful, though, in rationing that out is a hot wire, and training those animals to a hot wire, to keep them from just grazing all that they want. And I think I don't know if Dr. Hart's gotten to it yet or if he's going to get to it, but there's also a way to just give them a little bit of time on the pasture, and then pull them off the pasture for more time than they're on the pasture, in order to get them to eat just a little bit and not too much at a time. But one nice thing about the nutrient analysis that we do on stockpiled fescue, and I've even seen in northern Arkansas some stockpiled Bermuda being fed out in like January, having some really, really high quality testing on those plants, even in middle of winter. So that's kind of nice to see.
Yes, Jennifer, the quality of Bermuda grass is very dependent on how much rain you get on it. It can be good, and it can definitely, if you get a lot of rain on it, it just leaches badly. But it's worthwhile, definitely.
Okay, go ahead, Dr. Steve, please.
Okay. You have a better chance at accumulating stockpiled forage when doing rotational grazing. Other ideas, you can stockpile the last cutting of hay on a hay field. You can stockpile forage under continuous grazing if lightly stocked. Native range can be stockpiled by deferring grazing or by light stocking rate. So there's many different ways, and you have to think about what's applicable to your particular situation. You can limit feed hay if there is some sort of stockpiled forage available. Some stockpiled forage will not be consumed by animals because it's too poor in quality, or they just don't prefer it. You just have to look at what and how much stockpiled forage is available, and look at what animals are eating when not consuming hay or supplement. Requires you to walk around in amongst them and look at what they're chewing on. You can limit feed hay by putting a fence around it, such as electric fence, and limiting access to it for a limited time, such as an hour and a half. And then you get animals out of the area by feeding them their supplement outside that area. It's likely the best to feed animals hay and supplement in the afternoon. The strongest grazing urge is in the morning, and hopefully the animals will go after stockpiled forage. Animals don't really need a physiological urge to consume hay or supplement. This is a picture here of electric fence that's surrounding hay feeders. You see the gate here on it, and the hay feeders in the background with the goats eating the hay. How are your animals doing? Monitor body condition. How much flesh do the animals have? Start the winter with them in good shape. Good. We'd like to see body condition score of 3 out of 5 and maintain their flesh throughout the winter. Good flesh also helps the animals endure the cold. You need to feed extra hay when it's really cold so animals' rumen is full and generates heat, helps keep them warm. Very important to provide some sort of shelter from the wind. The long coat on an animal provides a layer of insulation with the hair that's trapped, with the air that's trapped under the hair. However, when the wind gets somewhere around 20 miles an hour, it mashes the hair down flat. And so there's no trapped air to provide insulation. And so the animal loses heat much faster. So that's why it's important to have some sort of shelter from the wind to reduce that wind speed where the animal's hair is more insulating. If hay is low in protein, supplemental protein can enhance digestibility and intake of the hay. Protein needs to be fed sufficient to meet the animal's requirement. If you have a dry animal, the requirement's fairly low. Late gestation, we have a greater requirement for protein. Lactation, even greater requirement.
Can I pause you, Dr. Hart? Can we camp on that first bullet point for just a minute and talk about what you mean by supplementing protein can enhance the intake, the amount of hay that they eat? Is that what you're trying to say there?
Yes, Jennifer, if you have, say, a native prairie hay that's 4 to 6% protein, protein's going to limit the digestion of hay in the rumen. And so providing supplemental hay will aid in both the rate and extent of digestion of the fiber. And so the animals can consume more as well as having an increased digestibility of the hay. But probably if you're over 7%, supplemental protein is not going to help you. The rumen will have adequate protein.
Thank you for explaining that.
Okay, common sources of protein, you can cattle cubes or pellets, lots of byproducts. You can provide protein as protein blocks or as a molasses protein lick. These latter two tend to be a little more pricey, but on the other hand, they do save labor. So it's kind of a trade-off there with what you want to do. Also, a mineral supplement should be fed. Most molasses licks do include minerals, so in that case, you probably may not need to feed minerals. Minerals need to contain high levels of whatever is deficient in your area. Usually copper for goats, not sheep, of course, zinc, manganese, selenium, and some of the areas of your state. Your state beef cattle nutritionist should know what minerals are deficient for cattle. If they're deficient for cattle, they're deficient for sheep or goats, with the exception of copper. Usually a cattle breeder mineral will be sufficient for goats. Sheep minerals have the low copper necessary for sheep. So then in conclusion, store and feed hay to minimize the waste. Purchase hay out of the field in the summer, it's cheaper. Develop a relationship with a hay producer so it can provide you the quality of hay that you need. Determine how you plan to feed your animals and purchase the appropriate quality of hay. Check what the hay looks like. Open a bale up and look at it, the leafiness of it, the stems, the mold, the smell. Get a hay analysis. Very important. Usually your county extension educator can help you to get a hay analysis. Plan on when you will lamb or kid. And I should point out here that some people lamb or kid year round, and that makes it hard to feed animals adequately, because some animals in your herd will need more nutrients for lactating, and other animals are dry and have low nutrient requirements. And so it's pretty hard to juggle things. Plan on using stockpiled forage to reduce hay requirement. Feed only as much hay as animals need. Monitor the animal's body condition and adjust the feeding level as appropriate. That is a very important point, because if you wait 2 months and then the animal's skinny and winter is really hard then, and it's really hard for animals to get their body condition back on. Provide shelter from the wind to reduce heat losses from animals. Provide the appropriate amount of protein, energy, and mineral supplementation.
Thank you, Steve. I have a question for you. I've always heard that providing like a corn supplementation or an energy-based supplementation on really cold days helps animals stay warm. Is that true? Like I saw you talk about the hay and getting the rumen going, but I've heard people specifically say corn, but I don't know if that's true or not.
Well, basically, corn may somewhat bypass the rumen. Hay provides a lot of heat in the rumen. That's one of the problems with hay is actually you lose energy in the rumen as heat, which is good in the winter, but not good in the summer. So hay will do better than corn on a per pound basis, definitely.
That's good to know. And then we do have one question that I missed earlier. It says, how does switching to hay or supplementation affect the animals if they've been foraging for the majority of the year in like shrubby type areas? Is there something we need to do in order to switch them from kind of a browse to a hay supplementation diet?
Well, all of your feed changes need to be made gradually if we can. And it's, and the biggest problem is when we're going from no starch to a high starch diet. You definitely need to gradually change animals there. Changing forages is less stressful and easier for the animals to adapt. But definitely, one would prefer not to have a total diet change in one overnight.
And when you say high starch, what are some things that are high in starches?
Of course, corn is the biggest problem that we see. Corn's a good feed, but you just have to consider that a sudden change in corn can cause some problems, such as enterotoxemia or acidosis.
Gotcha. And then we have another question here. Could you explain more about feeding moldy hay? What are the problems that might be related to it? And then are there any differences between the different colors of mold within the bales, whether it's white or green or pink or black?
Okay,
First question.
Dr. Steve, can you get closer to your camera? Yes, we want to see you. Yeah, thank you.
Maybe angle your camera down a little.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
I can't see it on my screen. Better?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Basically, question about mold. it is possible for molds to cause problems. Generally, we think of molds causing problems most of all in corn and other grains. But hays, animals will lots of times pick around the mold, try to avoid the mold. But I guess I'm not familiar, unless something is extremely moldy, I'm not familiar with mold really causing, moldy hay causing a problem. I mean, try to avoid it, very definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they have the mold, and the problems in the corn sometimes are the toxins that are developing this mold, and later on having some troubles in the animals with those aflatoxins or things like that. Yeah. But generally it's because the grain was under wet and developed this mold that sometimes you cannot see, but those toxins are over there. Yeah.
Yes.
With the grain. Dr. Steve, now the winter, we are just starting winter, and many people is wondering about the feeding during the winter because it's not like the same than the spring, than the summer. And we have been talking in other webinars about the season of the breeding for selling the animals and things like that. So you have the choice to have also, as you said, what kind of animals you will be having during the winter. They will be pregnant, they will be lambing, they will be milking. So what do you recommend with your experience about having the different physiology animals during the winter? Is better to have the pregnant animals to be lambing, kidding them during the spring, or for them to be lambing during the fall? So what do you recommend, just taking in consideration that you have here a very hard winter feeding?
Okay, producer has to develop what his production goal is. And usually it would be, if you're selling registered animals, people want to see bigger animals. That means you have to lamb or kid early in the spring because buyers like the bigger animals. And if you're producing show prospects, usually they have to be born at certain times of the year to fit the age classes that they're in. However, if you're in commercial production, and there are other, later kidding or lambing would be better. However, there are other considerations such as labor. When labor is available, certain times of the year, you may be raising or maybe planting corn or soybeans or sorghum or whatever, and that's not the time that you want to lamb or kid. And so you would lamb or kid some other time. But generally, later in the spring that we lamb or kid, and sometimes, for instance, in Oklahoma, winter wheat is a common forage resource, and many farmers would, with sheep, would lamb onto the wheat pasture in the fall to sell lambs in the spring for the Christmas season. For Easter season. So producer has to determine these are other factors in addition to nutrition. But if you can solely consider nutrition, you'd like to feed a dry animal to early to late pregnant animal and not have to feed a lactating animal. Lactating animals require a lot of protein and energy both, which are more expensive during the winter than they will be when you have green grass to graze.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. I might throw a couple other thoughts in. So as the economist, I like to ask these questions, and I like to put the price tag on all the different pieces, right? And And one of the other things that we know for in kind of our area geographically, climate wise, is that we know that our sheep and goats actually, our babies from birth to weaning actually grow better during the winter time periods than they do during the summer time periods, the late spring, early summer time periods. And there's a lot of suspicion. What we don't know is the exact why they grow better. There's a lot of suspicion around milk fat being a little higher on the, from the mamas in the winter. We tend to have a little less parasite parasite pressure in the winter than we do in the summer. So that's my economist hat talking, right? Like there's some other components that go into that. And then my farmer hat coming on says that I like when I am ready to wean babies, that they're ready to hit grass. And I like having that spring grass on those babies for them to grow very quickly. So I tend to have the farmer idea of winter lambing. So I tend to lamb in January and February. And then by the time weaning has happened and everybody's back on pasture, we've got some really great stuff for the ewes to be eating and some really great stuff for the lambs to be weaning onto. So that's kind of how I personally do it.
Everybody's got to determine their objectives and what works for them.
That's right.
And that is very important because there is no general recommendation. And sometimes the people are looking for a general recommendation, or you Google and you go over there and you find one story over there or experience, but probably doesn't work at all for you. So even for your neighbor, because he has or she has other goals, production goals. So, okay, so
I have one more question here in the chat, Romero.
Go ahead.
How good is ryegrass hay for sheep or goats?
Okay, well, Jennifer, assuming they're talking about annual ryegrass and assuming it's been cut at the right stage, it can be very good.
Yeah.
Ryegrass growing as far as grazing is probably one of the highest quality forages there is.
Yeah.
So it can be good, but if it's mature and got heads on it, it's much lower quality.
Yeah. Yeah, I use a lot of the ryegrass in irrigated pasture, and it's so good, but you have to take care of not to allow to be very mature also, and also no using it with this so young, because you may be having problems with nitrites. So you have to wait at least 21 days, because all that nitrogen is before being protein is nitrate. So it's like the plants, all the grasses are using the nitrate in the soil. So in the first 20 days in the plant, you go to the lab, they will say it had a lot of protein, but the protein is not true protein, it's nitrates. So you have to allow the plant to metabolize, to digest that nitrogen and to convert to true protein. So that will be after 21 days at least. So you will find in ryegrass like a probably 20% protein, but has to be after 20 days that you fertilize or you irrigate that grass, okay, after growing. But it's very good. You can have very good performance of your animals with ryegrass. Okay. So, is there another question?
I don't see any more.
Okay, well, so very good. Dr. Hart, thank you so much. Your experience is so amazing. And so we are going to have you again next week on Monday, the 11th of December, 4 o'clock. And you will be talking about numbers, economics, costs, prices, and that will be very good. Thank you so much. And also, we are going to have this webinar December 11, and we are going to resume in January. What is Mohan? Is January 8th?
The first one would be on January 8th, and the second one, let me double check on that one. So the January 8th would be feed tax, and January 15th would be balancing ration.
Okay, so and that will be also 4 o'clock. But also, I would like, it's not part of this certificate, but we are going to have 2 other webinars, one this week, and that will be now the 7th. We are going to have Kelly Lauren from Missouri Agriculture Department, talking about all the regulations for meat cutting, for butchering, and how you may be selling in a direct market. Will be very interesting. I will send you the invitation. That will be also Zoom, and that will be also on Facebook. And in the 14th, we are going to have a Jennifer again, and she will be talking about the cost, the difference of direct marketing with meat cuts or live animals. And we are going to have other farmers that they are selling already meat cuts. So we are going to send you also those invitations. These are no part of this certificate, but we are going to give those webinars as bonus for you. Okay. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for your time, and later on,
Salinas,
yeah.
there is one question. Where can we rewatch the previous webinars?
Okay, yeah, we have been recording all the classes, so I will upload those classes, the last 2 and today's class. All of them will be in a YouTube channel, and the people will maybe go over there and also to take some very simple tests in the way that they may be having by the end certificate diploma. Okay, for those ones that participate. So will be no like an excuse I couldn't. So over there will be in the YouTube channel, so you can just take it and answer some tests, or we can send you this diploma certificate, and also a gift of one of the books that we are going to be having. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Steve and Jennifer, Mohan, and everyone. See you next Monday, 4 o'clock, God willing.